The White House is backing a bipartisan legislation that could place restrictions or even ban the popular app TikTok. Yahoo Finance's Dan Howley is covering the story and joins us now. Dan, there are tons of U.S.-based apps that are banned in China. Why would this be such a big deal? Should it end up being blocked here?
Yeah, Dave, that's one of the things that I think a lot of people are wondering. And the basic explanation for that is that we have First Amendment rights in the U.S. China, not so much. So because of that, banning an app like TikTok, the argument goes, especially from organizations like the ACLU, is that you would be infringing on the First Amendment rights of millions of Americans who already use the app as a place for free expression. And so that's part of the discussion there. There's also the fact that the company has a right to operate as it does. Now, the flip side, when you look at China, where there are apps that are banned, we're talking about the likes of Twitter or Facebook. Google operated in the country for some time, but pulled out. They weren't necessarily banned when China tried to hack into their servers. They're not available there because China's basically an authoritarian government. And they can pretty much say what they want, and it has to go for its citizens. So that's really the main difference. The big deal about TikTok here, though, seems to be that it's almost a scapegoat for the relations between the U.S. and China. So far, the experts that I've spoken to have said, look, there's no real evidence that they're sending data to China. Americans' information is stored on servers in Virginia, run by Oracle. There's also been little proof from the government that there's any kind of espionage or propaganda going on with TikTok. In fact, a study by the Citizen Lab, part of Toronto University, found that TikTok and the Chinese version of TikTok are two wholly separate apps outside of some base code that runs them, and that data doesn't go back to Beijing. So there's this constant back and forth. And I think the reality is that, the government doesn't necessarily know that they're for certain that nothing is going on as far as nefarious actions with regards to TikTok. And so they're being overly cautious here. I think there's a broader conversation that could be had about consumer privacy, though.
And Dan, when it comes to some of the other companies that would potentially be impacted by this ban, because it's not just TikTok, who are they?
Yeah, I mean, you could look at a company like Apple as being potentially impacted by this. Essentially any company that gets data from Americans or uses Americans' data. And I think that's part of the larger conversation as well. Look, like I was alluding to, this really is a conversation that should be had regarding overall data privacy protection. And that's what, the experts that I spoke to have said. This is something where, we should be coming up with broader legislation with regards to where our data is stored, how it's stored, what happens if it goes missing, the rights that we have, and when these companies need to alert us as to how much data they're collecting in plain English, not legalese, right? So that's something that has been knocking around D.C. forever. But as you can imagine, there's certain tech companies out there that don't want that kind of legislation, or they'll say they want that legislation. I'm talking about Meta, really, but they want to have their hand in crafting it so that it doesn't impact them negatively. And I think that's the real crux of the argument that we should be having is where does our own data privacy end up? Not is it a China problem? Are we, worried that it's spreading propaganda? Look, they can spread propaganda on Twitter. They do that already. Their foreign minister says stuff that's wild all the time. So it's not as though TikTok is the only place that this could possibly happen. By the way, data on Facebook and Twitter can be used against people by China because it's publicly available. So the idea that this app is, some kind of wild espionage ring doesn't really seem to ring very true. I think it's more about the data policy and the data privacy protection that Americans really need.